San Francisco is a walking city. Californians are walking people. They like to get their exercise, to be outdoors, and to be safe. We handle a number of pedestrian injuries at the Dolan law firm, and they come in two major forms. One, where people trip or are knocked over or fall down because of uneven sidewalks, tree roots, or holes that are in the ground. The second form is where they get hit in crosswalks. Let's talk about the first one. In California, a landowner and a city must maintain their property in a reasonably safe condition. Uneven sidewalks are common throughout San Francisco, Los Angeles, and all of California because trees planted many years ago have root structures that have now grown out and have caused the buckling in sidewalks. Unfortunately, those sidewalks cause massive injuries. In San Francisco, we had the honor, but unfortunately also the responsibility, of representing a 72-year-old woman who was walking down Otis Street through an area where there was an uneven... Okay, so I'll say a 72-year-old woman who was walking down Otis Street through an area in which a sidewalk had been allowed to crack and collapse because of trucks turning into a driveway. As a result, there was a 2.5-inch deviation between where her last footfall was and her next footfall would be. And she stumbled, and she fell into a post, and she cracked her vertebrae, and she became disabled from her neck down. The city and the landowners claimed that she was not looking where she was going, or that she was dizzy or fainted, but we were able to prove, using some of our allies, that are the high technology companies like DK Global, to put together visual imagery to demonstrate how it was not her fault, but it was the fault of the people who failed to maintain the sidewalk in a safe it was the failure of the people who failed to maintain the sidewalk in a safe and even condition. She recovered $2.49 million, which allowed her to be cared for in dignity and to return to her home country in the Philippines, where she lived out her last years as best she could. These types of trip and fall injuries are just all too common. And unfortunately, the city turns a blind eye to its responsibility to maintain sidewalks. The second type of injury, the pedestrian injury. Buses, cars, trucks. They barrel through the streets, and they often aren't looking to see if pedestrians are crossing. They're in such a hurry to get through that orange light, as we call it often, a yellow light turning red, that without regard to the people who are crossing the street, they hit pedestrians and crosswalks. In California, the law is clear. A motor vehicle must yield to a pedestrian who is lawfully within the crosswalk. It is also clear that pedestrians must use reasonable safety when crossing the road. So many of these cases are evaluated upon who began the intersection first. Was it the pedestrian who was far enough out in the intersection to be seen, or was it the truck that was already in the intersection before the pedestrian stepped off the sidewalk? Many of these cases require a complex time and distance analysis, and they shouldn't be handled by people who don't do this on a regular basis. At the Dolan Law Firm, I have handled hundreds of pedestrian crosswalk injuries, and unfortunately, dozens of pedestrian crosswalk deaths. I'll use one example. And unfortunately, what I've seen often is that it's public buses like Muni or AC Transit, where the driver is not looking where they're going, and while turning right is looking left, and unfortunately running over people. One case I handled in Chinatown, a 68-year-old woman began crossing the street, and a bus went through a red light. It hit the woman, knocked her outside of the crosswalk. The police report came back and said the woman was outside of the crosswalk when she was hit. we were able to use pure physics and expert testimony to demonstrate she was lawfully in that crosswalk, 16 feet out into the roadway, with a green light when that bus hit her. What did the police report say? It said the bus had a green light and the woman had stepped off right in front of the bus. Why does that happen? The police and the bus drivers work for the same employer, the city and county. But with careful study and observation, we were able to demonstrate that that pedestrian had the right of way. And had that bus stopped, she would have crossed that street and gotten home. So if you or someone you know have been hit by a vehicle in a crosswalk, call us at the Dolan Law Firm. Allow us to help you and your family through that time of tragedy, and allow us to show what really happened, not what people said happened.